2020 was a record-breaking year for the Pokemon industry, and with the new year approaching of 2021, will we see another boom, or will we see a bust? Let's talk about that today. Hey everybody, this is Pokemon Classics reminding you that the classics never go out of style. For today's video, I thought we'd do something a little bit different and talk a little bit of my personal speculations and opinions on what might be in store for 2021. Now, obviously, the year 2020 was entirely unpredictable and a really interesting year for the hobby. We saw rejuvenated interest in Pokemon due to people being forced at home, economic stimulus checks, new celebrities entering the hobby, and a ton of new interest and exposure from the mainstream media. But what did all of this attention have in common? And are there any precursors from 2020 that we can look for replication in 2021? So today I'm going to present my hypothesis that 2021 might see another round of extreme growth in the Pokemon collecting hobby. And I think there are three important factors that we can explore as to why we could see this happen. Now again, this is just a disclaimer. These are my personal opinions and views. I'm not basing this off of a ton of data besides just some past experience and looking at some factors that we saw last year that I think are playing out in a similar fashion this year. So you guys can draw your own conclusions. When examining the 2020 Pokemon boom, there's really three factors that sort of coalesce to make the perfect scenario for Pokemon prices and interest to rapidly increase. The first factor being government shutdowns. With all sorts of recreational activities suddenly inaccessible, a number of individuals took refuge in old hobbies and past interests, like collectibles. Next, with the cash infusion of a government-issued stimulus check, consumers suddenly found themselves with more discretionary income available to spend on these hobbies. Lastly, this renewed interest, followed by additional capital, fueled new media attention, as additional celebrities entered the fray, drawing more attention to the hobby, creating almost this cyclical growth. Together, these three factors coalesce to form the perfect storm for Pokemon collectibles, especially when we add on an additional factor of grading companies experiencing a massive backlog, creating an imbalance between supply and demand. What could 2021 have to do with all of this? Well, I think we're seeing a similar scenario play out with those three factors. Especially when we take a look at that third factor of media attention, there's an extra special variable to throw into the mix that might spell massive success for Pokemon this year. Now, before I go any further, I do want to note that there has been a noticeable retrace amongst most cards in the Pokemon collecting hobby. As we got into the winter months of November and December, there was a pullback, especially as supply was catching up to the demand from grading companies like PSA. However, at the same time, there are certain cards that are still reaching record prices that are unaffected by the downturn in the market. Trophy cards, first edition PSA 10 Charizards, and even some low scarcity items like the record-setting Lugia at $129,000 at PWCC auction seem to be immune. We're sort of seeing a dichotomy in the market right now, with those low to mid-tier cards experiencing a retrace in value, while those that make up the upper echelon of the market continuing to climb. Now, I can't explain this fully, but I do think that there are some factors here that can help us make sense of that trend in the marketplace. So here's what I would recommend watching in 2021 to get an indication of what the future might hold. First is government shutdowns. We know that government shutdowns were the catalyst of renewed interest in Pokemon card collecting as people turn to online hobbies. If we see another round of government shutdowns, we might experience another surge in Pokemon interest. Second is stimulus checks. Now we know that stimulus checks are being talked about, discussed, and fought over politically at the moment, and it seems likely that at least some point in early 2021 that Americans are going to receive a second round of economic stimulus. This will provide more discretionary income that can be dedicated towards these types of hobbies. Lastly is media attention, and something really big is coming up in 2021. If you followed Pokemon for a while, you know that this year is the 25th anniversary of Pokemon, and Nintendo loves to celebrate, and with that comes increased media attention and exposure. So let's break down each of these three factors into a bit more detail, looking at some of the news headlines and trying to make an educated, informed assessment of where the Pokemon market is heading in 2021. Now, the first factor we need to consider is business shutdowns. As previously noted, the shutdown of local businesses, recreational facilities, and other forms of hobbies forced consumers into a digital space for their entertainment. We're seeing a new wave of business shutdowns coming into 2021. In fact, according to one article by Forbes, the third surge of shutdowns is currently happening, and once again we're seeing businesses across the United States and globally shutting their doors and restricting access. In fact, over in Europe, in the UK specifically, there's fears of a more readily transmissible variant of the virus spreading across the countryside. This provides consumers with more discretionary income to spend online and fewer options with which how to spend it. If we take a look back to the first round of government shutdowns in 2020, we'll notice a massive surge in online commerce to the tune of up to 35% for sites like eBay. Now I want you guys to take a careful look at this graph, noting the massive upward surge timed in coordination with the first round of government shutdowns. In fact, many articles noted the massive increase in interest going back to hobbies like Pokemon cards, baseball cards, Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! The effect was pretty much across the board that people were returning to things that they could do from the safety of their own homes. With the winter months kicking in and new rounds of shutdowns occurring, we might see a similar uptick. However, one other thing to notice about the graph is going into the end of quarter 3, there was a noticeable drop-off in online sales. Now, keep this graph in mind as we take a look at the prices of some high-interest Pokemon cards. We take a look at the first edition PSA 9 Charizard, which also experienced the same rapid growth coming out of March and April of 2020, just like the e-commerce sales from eBay, and then some of that tapering off into the end of quarter 3. Similarly, the first edition PSA 10 Dragonite shows a very comparable graph to the growth in eBay graph that we just looked at. Now, I don't want to draw a hasty conclusion from this, but what this indicates to me is that the rise in Pokemon card prices and the sales trajectory seems to follow almost perfectly with the overall trend in sales for online consumers. If we're forced into a situation of being stuck at home again, without recreational activities, without facilities and gyms to visit, without bars and restaurants, this once again could spur people into taking their consumerism online and picking up once again with the hobbies that they had previously started last year. Factor number 2 for us to consider is the payment of economic stimulus checks. Now, there's been a lot of debate and uncertainty over the rollout of the economic stimulus plan, with many experts wondering how much Americans will receive, and even if they'll receive a second round of economic stimulus. On the one hand, some have suggested the $600 that was originally passed by Congress, but threatened to be vetoed by President Trump. On the other hand, there are certain individuals and politicians that have advocated for $2,000 payments to each American. Regardless of how much is offered, it's going to have a profound impact on discretionary spending. Simply put, extra money in the pocketbooks of Americans is going to find its way into various parts of the economy, including the collectibles market. We saw the first round of stimulus act as a catalyst, sparking the growth in prices for Pokemon that would define much of 2020. So naturally, a second round of stimulus could have that same impact. Whether a family of 4 is set to receive $2,400 or $8,000, either way, that's a sizable chunk of money and could have a profound impact on Pokemon collecting. Now, I do want to explore the different tiers of collectible assets because there does appear to be a dichotomy between the low to mid-level items and those high-value items. Let's take a look. Those receiving the first round of economic stimulus payments were those in the low to medium income, making under $75,000 as an individual or $150,000 as a married couple. Now, naturally, this would make up the majority of the collecting market. And here's where we saw the vast majority of cards increase rapidly in price with that economic stimulus. Along those lines, this is also where the retrace was most evident for those low to mid-tier items. Now, this would make sense because those making under $75,000 were likely those that were more impacted by the economic hardships brought on by the global health crisis. On the other hand, those making over $75,000 or $150,000 for a married couple were not part of the first stimulus distribution. However, these high-value items, which are more likely appealing to these collectors, never saw the same level of retrace, as certain trophy cards continue to go for record prices, and every subsequent Charizard card just seems to set a new record. To me, this is interesting because it seems to suggest that those really high valuable rare items are not nearly as impacted by stimulus payments as some of those low to mid-range cards. If there is another stimulus payment, that seems to suggest that a lot of those lower mid-range cards that have been experiencing a bit of a retrace might make another surge. In fact, several news articles seem to agree with this assessment, stating that the extra money from stimulus payments provided consumers with extra disposable income to spend on childhood interests. So why should 2021 be any different? Our third factor for 2021 could be huge. This is the year that Pokemon celebrates its 25th anniversary, and looking at previous years, like the 20th anniversary, there's going to be some big things in store. Even the Pokemon Company itself teased massive celebration for its 25th anniversary. Now, what that could imply is anybody's guess at this point, but all we need to do really is look back to the 20th anniversary to get some indication. Just looking back 5 years ago, Nintendo and Pokemon released one of its most popular and widely sold sets to date, Evolutions. The Evolution set took it back to Pokemon's roots in Generation 1, reprinting a number of artworks from the original base set, and this set went off. Even today, it's one of the most widely acknowledged and popular sets in the Pokemon trading card game. Although it's unclear what Pokemon's planning for their 25th anniversary, one could assume that it's going to be big and that it's going to gather media attention from across the world. And in addition to stimulus checks acting as a catalyst for Pokemon growth, so too is media hype. We saw this with Pokemon Go when that was released in 2016 during the 20th anniversary. This was a boom unlike anybody had seen up till that time, and it really hasn't been replicated until 2020. In fact, one news article noticed this parallel and commented on Heritage Auctions' doubling of card sales immediately after Pokemon Go was released in 2016. With so much momentum behind Pokemon, could the 25th anniversary be even bigger? I don't know for sure, but it seems at least plausible. Now, there are also some key factors that we want to watch out for as potential dangers or cautions in the industry. The first of these is congressional inaction. Now, we know that the stimulus package is still in flux, with congressional leaders trying to work out a deal. Not only do we not know if it'll be $600, $1,200, or $2,000, but it is entirely possible that the package doesn't pass at all. That's one of the things we need to keep an eye on as we're going into 2021, is what is the landscape looking like politically and economically for the country as a whole. Naturally, if we have the additional money, the additional discretionary income, it will have some impact on the hobby. How profound that impact is yet to be shown. However, it is something to look at. It is something to consider. A second caution to keep an eye on is PSA saturation. With the initial boom of Pokemon in 2020 came a massive influx in cards submitted to grading companies like PSA, Beckett, and CGC. Naturally, the return of these massive submissions will redefine the supply that's available on the market, and with that change in supply will also come a change in demand, which causes prices and values to adjust accordingly. So as we enter 2021, we need to be aware of which cards are legitimately rare and scarce versus which ones have the potential to flood the market. Along those lines, I would encourage fellow collectors and hobbyists to be cautious of cards that have abundant supply. Over the last few months, certain cards have reached what I would suggest are unsustainable prices based on their rarity. Cards like the original base starters, which are only commons, have massive quantities that are currently being submitted to PSA. And although it might seem obvious, a growing supply will also equal a lower demand for those cards. We can also see this with the jungle commons like Pikachu and Eevee. In fact, in this current PWCC auction block, there are 19 graded first edition jungle Pikachus. And if that doesn't tell you that there's something wrong with the supply and demand, I don't know what will. To me, that's a major red flag. Lastly, we need to be careful of cards in the lower grades. These don't actually have scarcity. especially as a number of people have submitted mass copies of cards to PSA. It's just a matter of time before those cards return and then enter the market. When it comes to 2021, I think if we can arm ourselves with knowledge and take a look at the precursors that were set last year in 2020, as well as looking back to some of the other major surges in Pokemon collecting history, that we can equip ourselves with the knowledge to make educated, informed decisions. So for my final thoughts, we can't be certain about anything going into 2021. Every year, every situation is entirely unique. However, at the same time, there are certain factors we can look back to if we want to get a sense of history and a sense of perspective. With impending government shutdowns, the likelihood of new stimulus checks being issued, and new media attention coming from Pokemon's 25th anniversary, I think there's plenty of reason for optimism about what 2021 might hold. Anyway, guys, those are just my thoughts and opinions on the future of the Pokemon market in 2021. Either way, I'm going to enjoy collecting. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I look forward to hearing your opinions about 2021 down in the comments below. Anyway, guys, I'm Pokemon Classics, reminding you that the classics never go out of style. We'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.